Elizabeth Kostelny, and I am the CEO of Preservation Virginia, and it is a real honor to be in this position. Our effectiveness as an organization is born out of our deeply held belief that historic places matter. They are dynamic forums for dialogues about the people and events and the past, and how the legacies of those moments continue to shape our present and our future.
I'm David Brown, and I am the retired Chief Preservation Officer and Executive Vice President of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, where I worked for 23 years. It was in 1995, and I was the Executive Director of the Preservation Alliance of Virginia. And we had just released the first economic study of preservation in the state. And Elizabeth came to the announcement that we did, which was down in Old City Hall in Richmond. I had to get up on a ladder to make my remarks and to introduce people and to talk about this great study that we had. And Elizabeth always said that she started out looking up to me. And I love to tell Elizabeth, well, Elizabeth, I tell you, over time, the roles were reversed, and I certainly looked up to you a great deal.
I'm Mary Ellen Stumpf, and back in 1994, what was then called APVA contracted with me and one of my associates to take a look at the statewide development program, the membership program. So the first time I met her, she was second in command and was, just a wonderful person. I knew Peter a little bit, but Elizabeth just really struck me as just a bright star.
The first month that we organized as a family association to save the Pine Grove School, we contacted Preservation Virginia. And I have to tell you that trio of Elizabeth, Jenny Keller, and Sonia Ingram, those ladies got it done. They were the first to write a letter in support of AMMD against the landfill. They were the ones who kind of charted a path as to what to do.
In the conversations with Elizabeth, I remember feeling like here was someone who sounded like an honest broker. So we realized that between sort of 2004 and 2014, we had been in protest mode, right? Advocacy for preservation and protection, but prevention of the loss of this resource to the community. Preservation Virginia helped us to facilitate community conversations in the spring of 2015. The 2015 proposal was originally called an alternative proposal for Shockoe Bottom. And in it, the first recommendation in relation to the physical space was that we should clarify the boundaries, secure the property, and create a park. And again, phenomenally helpful. I mean, these are really key benchmarks in being able to not only do the work to protect the area, but to envision what it could become.
I met Elizabeth not too long after she moved into the CEO position, and it was in conjunction with the 2007 commemoration at Jamestown Island. So a very complicated and delicate kind of situation that needed to be handled with great care. Elizabeth stood out in the discussions that were taking place on that particular event and the series of events that wrapped around it. And I think that she demonstrated very clearly that this was somebody who really understood how you draw people into understanding the importance of recognizing and preserving our historical background.
It was I would say a sprint, a 10-year sprint. I mean, work had begun long before, 10 years before 2007. But it had to be a multifaceted partnership. It had to be a partnership between the Congress and the National Park Service, the Park Foundation, of course Jamestown, Yorktown, and certainly Preservation Virginia and the Jamestown Rediscovery crew. Elizabeth was always revered and respected by those folks, Senator Warner's office, or it might have been our park colleagues, her peers.
And there were a lot of questions that had to be addressed. The logistics were really challenging, but Elizabeth again was always a leader in those discussions. Somebody who was anxious to make sure that Jamestown Island was central.
But boy, leading up to the big day, clearly the very intimate, private visit by Her Majesty and the Prince was going to be at historic Jamestown with only about 110 people, there. So it was very, very intimate, and so I always think of that very fondly and Elizabeth's role. But at the same time, it was not only the commemoration, but it was the statewide evolution that she never lost sight of. So those were two epic jobs, happening simultaneously.
As time passed, and after I left and went to the National Trust, APVA at the time became much more active politically. And I think there was a realization that the reason that the Preservation Alliance had been established was now being taken over more by what became Preservation Virginia. So it was a good time to merge.
There have been so many really amazing relationships that have been built over that time. The Tobacco Barn project, the Rosenwald Tuskegee Schools project, the working with local African American churches and communities on various preservation projects. The cemeteries are now sort of a movement, and that's a lot of amazing work.
Elizabeth has the ability to listen. And I would voice concerns about whose history is being valued. And then you started working to change that. So seeing a problem, seeing a disparity, and doing something about it is what I think has set Preservation Virginia apart.
Where are the internships for African American students, right? And within a year, the organization had made a decision to create the African American Preservation Fellowship Program. I was like, this is awesome.
I think the thing that I've admired about Elizabeth, and where I've worked most closely with her perhaps, has been in her courage in taking on difficult tasks. Running a historic preservation organization is not easy.
I think folks who look at the power lines that have been constructed across the James River feel that maybe there was not a success in that particular event. But I think more broadly, it was a successful effort. What we were able to do in a coalition in which Elizabeth played a central role was to establish the principles that there needed to be much more consultation on infrastructure development, on planning, on development around historic sites. In the future, viewshed will be an important consideration. In the future, historic preservation will be critical. Elizabeth was one of the leading members putting together groups of organizations, national, state, and local, that really did deliver a very strong message that the courts heard, the federal courts heard.
It was really helpful to sort of be in touch with people who understood what preservation means. At that point, I think really what we were happiest about was that we had a strategic partner who was also not trying to pull strings, and there was no catch to that relationship.
But I can tell you that she's left an indelible mark here in James City County and the greater Williamsburg area on our community and how we present the historical nature of our assets and especially the treasure of Jamestown Island.
I think she was absolutely key. And again, I don't think there was ever any question of her diligence and her patience and her nurturing of partnerships, even when it was hard to be a partner sometimes. She was always very welcoming, always was, held her head high, always very classy, always. Everybody trusted and respected, Elizabeth.
I like to think of Elizabeth as one of those quiet but effective servant leaders, where she really works. And it's not about her. It's not about being the person out in front, but it's really about how do we bring everybody together. And I just think that's an amazing leadership technique. When I think back on her 34 years at Preservation Virginia, I think of that quiet, effective leadership. And I know it's going to be missed, but I know it's also just going to leave a long legacy.
I hope Elizabeth will stay really close by, because she gets it. She absolutely gets it. She is willing to put in the hard work, or has been anyway. I hope she'll rest for a while.